Hey everyone, welcome back to FPL Fran. Today's video is going to be my GW32 team selection, and I'm recording right now after recovering from a pretty bad red arrow. But the bad red arrow basically sends us from 362 in the world to around 1,427. So a huge rank drop. The only person who did well in my team was Palmer. The only differential in my team who did well was Neto, whereas a lot of people I think, had hat tricks, had braces, had goals, had assists, things like that, and maybe even more clean sheet points than me, particularly from Zabani. And once again, it goes back to that decision to wildcard in 26, but also specifically the picks that I went with, right? There were times where I was considering Ait-Nouri and Odegaard. There were times where I was considering Garnacho as well instead of Pedro Neto. Ultimately, nothing sort of fell my way in recent weeks. We had the Senesi injury. That meant that I missed out on Zabani because I didn't want to take a -4 for Saliba on game week 28. Since then, Zabani has scored a goal. He got the clean sheet as well because he wasn't injured versus Burnley on game week 27, I believe. And then also, of course, recently, once again, another Bournemouth clean sheet missed. And also a lot of defensive transfers being used, right? Because I could have played Zabani last week, I could have played Zabani this week, and that would have prevented me from probably taking any hits at all because I probably could have rolled last week too. But that's the situation in FPL. You make transfers, you address injuries, and sometimes, of course, the team just doesn't live up to your expectations. Foden completely demolished me. So did Garnacho, as I said. And we got 42 points this week, and we dropped to 1,427 in the world. That's that. We did get Salah in. Fernandes did score. Fernandes, rather. And Watkins, as we expected, wasn't actually featuring, but John Duran, his replacement, completely also took away a clean sheet from me with Guardiola, and we just have to move on. Flecken also overperformed Neto as well, but that's that. That was really the game week. We couldn't even field 11 players this week after taking -8. It just shows you the state of FPL sometimes, but, maybe partially bad decisions for myself too. I could have gone even for a -4 for Luis Diaz, which was something that I was, tempted with if you guys were watching the team selection video, and technically that probably would have left me a little bit better off somehow, ironically. But that's the position we're in. I think we just have to move on from an FPL point of view. What I like about this week, though, is that this is once again a week where you can consider to maybe move into a Liverpool attacker because United continue to look like a really poor defense, and they also just simply have a lot of injuries, right? So this is a good time to target a team like United. At the same time, I would say this is an interesting week to look into your Wolves and your Evertons of the world. So an Everton defender transfer, a Wolves defender transfer like Ait-Nouri, or even a transfer towards someone like Sarabia makes a lot of sense this week, particularly since we still have a small concern over Saka, right? Because the concern with Saka and Haaland is they both got rests within the Aston Villa game. Saka wasn't even in the squad, to be honest, versus Luton, which is an interesting sort of thing that we've not seen before, really, with Arteta, right? We've seen Saka play through the season with his injury. He did seem like he was very fatigued versus City. And maybe he's not going to play significant minutes versus Brighton either. I'm not exactly sure what Arteta is going to sort of let us know. Unfortunately, too, we will get that Arsenal game. Well, fortunately, rather, we will get that Arsenal game on the Saturday, but unfortunately not, for example, as one of the early fixtures. Now, we don't usually get Arsenal leaks, so I don't think that's going to really give us sufficient information. But another thing that's nice usually that we get is Man City leaks. And so if we get a Man City league, what's nice about it is that we can probably react to that accordingly on the Game Week 32 deadline. So I think that's one thing to sort of point out to for all FPL managers if you're thinking about making moves around that Crystal Palace fixture, particularly if it's, let's say, going back into Foden, going into another Man City defender. And that's just something to talk about as we close off on Game Week 31 and talk about a prelude to Game Week 32. Now let's move on towards my team selection for Game Week 32. Now this is theoretical, 0.0 off of the transfer that I would make for this week, and it's a very tight position to be in, but it's a position that I would also like to get myself into. And so the position that I'd like to get into is to go for a midfielder transfer. You guys know I have Pedro Neto, so I'll leave that to your mind while we talk about the defense. As far as the defense, though, we're going to go once again with Neto. He just simply has a better fixture than Flecken, in my opinion, right? It's Aston Villa versus Luton. That's the comparison here. Both teams away from home. Bournemouth defense probably slightly worse still than the Brentford defense. Somehow Brentford defense looks a little bit better, and maybe part of that too is once again moving away from someone like Reguilon, a very attacking defender, someone who's not very good at defending, and that giving Brentford a little bit of stability at the back. And so I will be going with Neto regardless. And Luton still have a lot of injuries. Aston Villa probably are going to have Watkins back, and so I think I'd be a bit more concerned about Flecken and his ability to keep a clean sheet. So therefore we go with Neto. As far as the defense, I did talk about the potential opportunity here to sort of play against the Arsenal defense. And I simply have to just say that it still looks like something that I'm probably not going to do. So unfortunately with Pau, with Gusto, I just think the performances have been so poor for Chelsea from a defensive point of view. And it's also an away fixture. And clearly, they're not at the level of defense as a team like Arsenal, not even close. But I think when you talk about the fixture differences, Brighton being a pretty good offense, Sheffield United being a pretty bad offense, but still actually looking quite good within the last two games, particularly within the Liverpool game. Early stages of the Liverpool game, they were actually all over Liverpool. Within the Fulham game, somehow they were also all over Fulham too in the first half. So that's a small concern that I don't think that this Chelsea team will really be able to overcome. Maybe if I want to be a little bit more differential, I think I can definitely just play Gusto. But for now, I'm tempted to just play Saliba, Gabriel, and Guardiola. So these are the two players in terms of Arsenal that I'm a little bit more confident in. Chelsea do have better clean sheet odds, but I think another concern too is whether Gusto is truly fatigued or not, right? We saw an early substitution within the Man United game. He was also struggling to defend, I would say, and that was a little bit of a point of concern. And maybe going forwards to the Sheffield United game, who knows? He could be benched. I don't think it's possible, so maybe Saliba will be someone that I kind of 50-50 make that decision with Gusto with once again. He's still a very good attacking asset. It's not like Sheffield United are a good defense, right? So still an option to play around with. Pau Torres, though, actually has less clean sheet odds than Arsenal versus Brighton away. And so looking at that point of view, I still think that Pau is going to be sitting at the back of my bench this week, and Guardiola will definitely start. He's probably the defender that I'm most confident about starting, just because I think Crystal Palace are still a really, really poor offensive team, and we saw that being showcased versus Bournemouth, so no concerns there. As far as the midfield, though, now we can actually see the debut of a new transfer for me. Son and Salah will make the team, so does Palmer. These are players that we've kept for a long time here. Now, a lot of people have been unfortunately dealing with the consequences of, let's say, moving Foden out of their team and keeping Son. Some people obviously have been a bit fortunate, doing the opposite transfer, right? Going out of Son and keeping Foden. However, one thing to mention, of course, is that Son is still Son. He is also capable of getting hat tricks. He's also capable of getting consistent FPL points. So I'm not too concerned about owning Son, not owning Foden for the meantime. One thing to think about too, though, and I think it's a fair point that's being raised, is how good are Haaland's minutes going forwards, and whether he's actually worth the price, in the sense that if you can cover your captaincies through other picks, Palmer is such a good example of that. Salah is a good example of that. Even Foden, for example, or looking towards Son, who we recently captained quite a fair bit. These are the players that you can actually replace, with captaincy-wise over Haaland. And maybe on Game Week 37, if you're tempted, you could simply just captain someone like Foden as well. And if maybe you find that Foden is someone who has increasing importance within the squad, it makes sense to maybe consider, of course, moving away from Haaland. But one of my concerns with moving away from Haaland ultimately is that I will be missing that Luton fixture where I think he'll definitely play. I'd be quite shocked to see him not playing that fixture, to be honest. And because of that, alone, I think what I'll be doing is assessing whether I want to go out of Haaland on Game Week 34, maybe as part of a slightly larger hit, just so that I can kind of, look at an opportunity to field a very strong team for Game Week 34, or maybe move my team away from it, maybe around Game Week 35 instead, right? Because if I go for Haaland versus Brighton, I don't think that, unfortunately, one of the things with Game Week 34 is that a lot of the doublers ultimately aren't that expensive, right? Your Sarabias, your Ezes, your Ait-Nouris, your Mikalenkos, your Tarkovskis of the world aren't too expensive. So unless you really want to invest into Liverpool as a team wholeheartedly, I think one thing you can do is maybe to delay that Haaland decision to Game Week 35. And a lot of people have to do that anyways, because people who are free hitting on 34 will get that chance to sort of reassess whether they want to have Haaland in their team going forwards, and whether maybe there's, another sort of optimal triple up with City. And that can be interesting too, just because it can allow for a little bit more of a flexible squad for most managers. One thing that I'll mention, though, is that Salah, of course, doesn't double in Game Week 37. So the idea that maybe you can just take Salah out of your squad instead, I think is also very prevalent if you are confident in Haaland's minutes towards the end of the season, which I am at this moment in time. So I'm not too concerned about Haaland, but just wanted to sort of put that discussion in the ether there for people who, of course, are looking towards Foden, and obviously, noticing that, first of all, his minutes are very, very good from a Premier League perspective, something that's actually basically, new for Foden. And also, of course, that KDB has, slightly declined in terms of his importance, I would say, given at his age, of course, that he can't play every single fixture, noting that City, of course, are involved within 3-4 competitions at one time. So that thing has that has sort of exacerbated Foden's importance within FPL as well as the Premier League, really. So shout outs to Foden once again for continuing to destroy me. But that's that on Foden. What I have done, of course, is I brought in Luis Diaz, and part of this is because I'm not going to free it in 34. I do need a strong team for Game Week 34, and I think Luis Diaz does have that with short-term fixtures that are actually quite good, because previously we were looking at the fixture for United and maybe saying that that's actually quite a tough fixture. But this United defense, just watching them versus Brentford, watching them versus Chelsea, yes, of course, these were away performances as well, but these were shocking performances too, to be honest. And I'm just really struggling to think that this United defense can somewhat rectify itself for the Liverpool fixture. Now, we have seen United actually this season twice over perform quite well versus Liverpool, but the reality is I think they'll still give a lot of chances away. And I think this is a good opportunity to actually move into someone like Luis Diaz, who's actually established himself as an extremely important player for this Liverpool team. So right now I can just count the amount of games that he started in a row. It's basically from that Chelsea fixture from game week 22 to 31 here, we've had effectively 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 games in a row where he started and basically played 88 to 90 minutes a game, which is huge. So I think Luis Diaz, we just need to sort of change the perspective in our head of the sort of priority within the players. Yes, of course, Jota's coming back, but there's also a question as to whether maybe Jota would be taking away a little bit more from Darwin's minutes and how, for example, Liverpool would be managing his injury, right? He's been injured a couple of times this season. It would make sense for them to once again practice with a little bit of patience. And I still think that he's going to get very diminished minutes for game week 34. So that makes me like Luis Diaz a lot as an option. And Gakpo played pretty well, to be fair, on today's fixture in game week 31. So maybe it's the case that Darwin could be the one that's set to lose minutes going forwards. Who knows? Obviously, in this game too, they were chasing, right? Salah was an early substitution. Sheffield United, of course, were the team that they needed to still sort of overcome, and Gakpo became a substitute, and that allowed Darwin and Gakpo to basically both play up top. So that's a nice thing in terms of, I think, the safety of Darwin's minutes. I'm not saying that I would change my mind on Darwin, but for those managers who are actually interested in, let's say, going a little bit left field, I do think Luis Diaz is a good choice, and that's why I've gone with the Luis Diaz decision here as a differential. And another thing that you guys might notice is that I've actually benched Bukayo Saka. Part of that is because maybe we'll get an update from Arteta as to whether he's going to start, whether he's going to be a part of the squad for Brighton. But I mean, there must be something to the fact that Saka was not within the squad at all for Luton. I think that's quite a big change in terms of what's happened previously in the season, right? When there were important fixtures, when there were tight fixtures, when there were effectively doubles for Arsenal within a single game week, we basically saw that Saka was still going to play at least 45 minutes, right? And when I talk about doubles, I just mean, European fixtures, cup fixtures as well, being sandwiched in there as well. So Saka not being part of the squad, I think, is quite huge. I also think that I'd be a little bit concerned about his minutes versus Brighton because they've also got such an important match in the Champions League versus Bayern Munich, and maybe it's the case that they're trying to manage both loads. They were able to go through Luton quite easily without Saka. I'm not sure necessarily that I could say the same with a team like Brighton, but to be fair, it's been done. We've seen rotation for the first time ever, really, with Arteta, with a couple changes, from the starting 11, not just Saka. And that sort of gives me a little bit of caution as to how many minutes we're going to get versus Brighton. And I think it's a good opportunity to maybe put a very highly owned player on the bench this week and, take advantage of the fact that I have one very useless player within my team in FPL and move into someone like Luis Diaz here, who has a good fixture on paper, despite it being an away fixture, right? United is just such a good fixture. Liverpool are still a very strong attack. And I'll take my chances here with Luis Diaz over Saka. And then in the forward line here, we're going to be fielding Solanke, Muniz, and Haaland. I think Haaland is an interesting one too, because he was at least on the bench versus Aston Villa. So maybe to make that comparison towards Saka, it seemed like at one point in time we were actually going to see Haaland play, but then actually Foden basically closed the fixture out without a doubt. And then we didn't get to see Haaland play. He was warming up at one point in time. So I think Haaland is definitely, close to full fitness, and I wouldn't be too concerned about his availability versus Crystal Palace. On the flip side here, we have Muniz and Solanke, who just, in my opinion, have great fixtures. Newcastle have been an awful defense this season. They continue to have injuries, and they continue to suffer injuries even, as early as two days ago. So for me, I think this is a good opportunity to play Muniz. I wouldn't be too concerned about his minutes. It seems like he's effectively become that sort of 90-minute player for Fulham, despite Jimenez obviously being there, despite Broja being there as well. So that's something that's really nice. And with Solanke too, just another great fixture, able to target a Luton team. I'll take my chances once again with the penalty taker versus Luton, and I'll bench Saka here, taking this opportunity to do so. So that's going to be my team selection for this week. And of course, Luis Diaz making that transfer will effectively leave me to having 0.0 in the bank. The future transfers that I'm planning to make, though, will be, out from Pau Torres, who, of course, can simply be someone like Branthwaite in the future. If I just want another doubling player in Game Week 34, that's basically my route to theirs. Actually, before I go, I wanted to talk about captaincy as well. So captaincy is something that is going to be very interesting this week. I think a lot of people are playing around with Son, Salah, Palmer, and Haaland. Even Muniz, arguably, in this case, can be played with as a captaincy option. Maybe Solanke too. ultimately, a lot of people have really good fixtures, some of them away, some of them at home. Son obviously has the home fixture. One thing that I'll say, of course, is that Palmer is clearly the most informed player here, but 2 penalties. We like to say that this doesn't happen often. This reminds me, of course, the Bruno Fernandes season where he just got a multitude of penalties, and a lot of them still deserve, to be quite honest. So nothing against Palmer, but I just can't see, for example, another performance where he's getting penalties again. And I still think that Salah, this is a great chance to target a really, really poor United team. I'd hope, of course, that he doesn't get substitute at 60 minutes again. If it seems like he's also very fatigued, so maybe we need to listen to what Klopp might have to offer to us press conference wise about this. But I kind of like to take the chances here once again with United. They just look so poor. Liverpool's, for me, are still the best attack in the league, and I still think Salah is the main spear of that attack. And so I'll take the chances with Salah here, vice captaining Palmer. Son, I think, is still a great pick. Holland, I think, is also a great pick, but probably a little bit more boring just because Crystal Palace still look like a very good defense. Nottingham Forest, I'd say, are a bit more of a better defensive team than United or Sheffield United at this moment in time. So just want to target those 2 fixtures, and I'll probably make that 50-50 decision between Salah and Palmer closer towards the deadline. But right now, I am sat on a Salah captaincy. That's the plan for this week, and we're going to close it out there with the video. Hopefully, we can get a green arrow that somewhat rectifies the huge major drop that we took this week. And that's it. I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope you guys had better weeks than me. Love you guys. Take care and goodbye.